Welcome back, friends, and if you're new here, welcome. I'm Leslie, and today we'll be painting this ink drawing that I completed last October during my daily Housetober challenge, where I drew a different house every day. If you'd like to see a photograph of this, they're available on my Patreon, or you can just take a screenshot so that you can draw it yourself or use it as a traceable. The colors I'll be using today are from the M-Gram Landscape set, and I'll run through those with you. The yellow is Cadmium Yellow Light, the red is Naphthol Red, the blue is Ultramarine Blue, the green is Hooker's Green, and then I have Burnt Umber, which I don't normally use, although I will use a little bit of it today. I've also added Transparent Red Iron Oxide, which is the color that I usually use instead of Burnt Umber. Don't worry if you don't have this color, it's very similar to Burnt Sienna. I've made a swatch card of some of the general mixes that I'll be using today. For the sky, I'll be using a combination of ultramarine at the top, and then as it nears the horizon line, adding just a dash of the naphthol. For the bricks of the lighthouse, I'll be using some transparent red oxide with a dash of the naphthol in certain areas. And for the tiles of the roof of this house portion, I'll be using a combination of burnt umber and ultramarine. In some areas, it will have a bit more of the burnt umber, and in others a bit more of the ultramarine. And in the grassy area and the bushes, I'll be using a combination of different colors. For the grassy part, I'll be using the Hooker's Green and ultramarine with just a dash of the cadmium yellow. And for the warmer areas in the front, I'll be using the Hooker's Green and cadmium yellow light with a bit of the transparent red oxide. And then in other areas, I'll just be using the Hooker's Green. And let's get started painting. These are the two brushes I'll be using for this painting. The first is a number 8 Rosemary & Co. pointed red dot, and the other is a number 4 Kolinsky Sable Series 33. Any round brush or detail brush or a pointed round brush would be fine for this. I always start by spritzing my watercolors to help reactivate them. I have two jars off screen. One is for dirty water and one is for rinse water. And then I have a smaller jar that I use just for wetting the brush. I'm not going to be painting all the way to the edges for this. I'd like for the painting to be a vignette. I've taken it off the clip for now so that there's no hard edge or beading of the color. And for the sky, I'm using the ultramarine at the top, and I'm going to paint that onto the dry paper. I've stretched my paper by pre-wetting it, both on the front and the back twice, and allowing it to dry. And I'll be painting the sky wet onto dry using this mixture. I'm going to leave some areas that are white for the clouds. And as I get further down to the horizon line, I'm going to add just a dash of the red to give it more of a violet tint. And after I'm satisfied with that, I'm going to clip it back onto the clipboard. Next, I'll put down the base of the lighthouse, and for that I'm going to use the transparent red oxide with just a dash of the naphthol red. And I'll place that in a very light wash. And And that same color extends to the bricks on the house. This section on the right and underneath the eaves of the porch are in shadow, so they are a darker color. So I'll take that same mixture of transparent red oxide with a bit of naphthol, and to that I'll add a bit of the ultramarine. And I'll also put that same mixture under the eaves. And then adding a bit more of the transparent red oxide and red, I'll put in this chimney. And catch a little bit of the side of the house here. I'm going to take this blue color from the sky, and to that I'm going to mix a bit of the burnt umber and create a base for the tiles of the roof. I'm looking for kind of a slate gray color. And I'll take some more of that color and add it to the top of this part of the lighthouse. And then I'll darken it for this area, adding a bit more blue and a bit more of the burnt umber. And I want it to be shifted a little bit more towards the blue for this. I'm taking the same color and just putting it in some of the other shadow areas that I see, like underneath the eaves of the porch, underneath the guttering up here. And I'm going to leave that to dry and start to focus on putting down the first base coat for the grass and the bushes down below here. For the grassy section, I'm going to take a bit of the hooker's green with a dash of the ultramarine and some of the cadmium yellow light. And using a damp brush, I'm going to lift off just a few areas where there are highlights. I'll add a bit more yellow to the mixture for some of the bushes in the foreground. And I want them to be a bit warmer, so I'm actually going to take a little bit of the transparent red oxide and add that to the mix as well to warm it up. And then I'll just sprinkle that around. And then I'll add a bit more of the hooker's green. And the yellow. With a dash of the ultramarine to create a darker green for some of the darker areas in the bushes, or more of the mid-tone. putting down my base coat first, and then I'll go in and add a mid-tone over that. And then my last step will be to go in and add the shadows when things have dried a little bit more. So to create more of a mid-tone, I'm going to add a bit more of the blue. And just sprinkle that into some of the shaded areas. As I use the color in my palette, I'll just remix it, and I'm not worried if the color is slightly different, because that will give it a more realistic look. And then to blend the colors just a little bit more, I'll give them a very light spritz with my spray mister. And that will encourage them to blend together a little bit better. I'm also going to take this darker color and add it to the bush in the background. And because this is further in the distance, and because this bush is further in the shadow, there will be more of the green and blue and less of the yellow. And I want to sprinkle some more of this shaded color into some of the shadow areas of these bushes in the foreground. And I want to make sure as I do this not to cover up the lighter areas. One nice thing about using a limited palette is that you don't need as much mixing space because you're constantly shifting colors. There's more of a rusty yellow on the edges of the rooftop and above the windows. And so to mix that, I'm going to use my cadmium yellow light with a dash of the transparent red oxide. And I can just put those in then. And I'll add that same color to the other areas where the sunlight is catching. I also want to add a little bit of that to the light, even though the light isn't on. The sunlight reflects off of the mechanisms here. I want to now add a second coat to the brick, and for that I'll be using the transparent red oxide and the naphthol red. And I want this area to be a little bit brighter because my light source is coming from this direction and hitting these two areas. And there's also a little section here. And then I'll mix that same color with a little bit of the ultramarine for the shaded areas. And this slight variation in color is what's going to help give this building some more form and dimension. And then for this final panel, I'll add even more blue. And then I'll use that same shadow color into these shaded areas. I'd like to add some more dimension to the tiles of the roof, so into my gray mixture here, I'll add a bit more of the pigment, which is the ultramarine and the burnt umber. And using the smaller pointed brush, I'll add that in strategic areas, so along the top. And then I'll dot it in to make it look a bit more like slates. And I'm making sure to leave some of the lighter areas as well. And then I'll darken that color up again for the darkest shadows. And that's where this building overlaps onto this one and casts shadows onto the roof. And this will dry a little bit lighter than it appears right now. And I'm taking some of that shadow color and I'm going to add some over here to this side of the round tower. And I've now mixed a really inky black with those two colors, and I'm going to add that to the areas of the composition where things are darkest. So underneath the lip of the roof here, and again here. And then creating shadows underneath this area. Then I'm going to thin that out with a little bit of water and extend those shadows into the building. I'm feeling pretty happy with most of the colors. I would like to add a little bit more blue to the roof, but there are some areas where the definition has become a little bit fuzzy, and so in this final stage, I want to redefine those areas. And so to do that, I'm going to mix a variety of different colors. I'm going to start with the transparent red oxide and just a little bit of the ultramarine to tone it down. And then the areas in the building where I see the brighter red color, I'll add those with my pointed round brush. And the trick with this is just to go slowly and take your time and have a bit of fun with it. It's just basically drawing with your brush. All of these windowsills are a bit brighter, and I might add a bit of this color up here as well, and in just a few areas to help balance it out. I want to leave a little bit of the white for the painted white of the windowsills here. I'm going to take this brighter color as well and just add a bit of definition on these sides of the building to indicate that pattern of brickwork. Now I'll take that same color, the transparent red oxide and the ultramarine, but I'll make it a little bit darker by adding a bit more of the ultramarine. And that will slightly shift some of these details into looking like they're more in shade. So some of these details on the chimney. And some of these areas around the windows. I'm going to go into my dark mixture again and water it down, and then add a bit more of color into this area of the light. And then add a bit more blue to that and water that down. And then add a bit of that to the rooftop. This gives it a little more texture, and it also shows that it's reflecting back from the color of the sky. I'm going to take some of this green and add that to the base in some of these areas. Just to indicate a little more of the shadows. Add a little touch of the rooftop over here peeking through. And I want to water that down even more, just to put in a little bit of the sky reflection in the window here and here. I've lost a little bit of the definition in some of these areas, so I'm going to take my white gouache and mix just a tiny tint of color and add that to some of these areas. And add in a little bit more of this shadow where it bled down too far. And there's a little bit more shading here with these porch rails. And that will do it for our little watercolor sketch for today. I hope you enjoyed this and maybe even painted along. If you did, please tag me on Instagram because I'd love to see it. Let me know in the comments if you like this type of content and I can create more in the future. I hope you have a beautiful day and happy painting.